Hi, my name is Mikko and I'm going to show you in the next 20 minutes how you can collect SEO data using free Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager and some simple JavaScript. Basically, you will learn how to build your own SEO crawler that collects real-time data while users visit your website. Like so many other people in the analytics, I started my career in SEO and moved to analytics something like 5 years ago. Nowadays, I mostly work with clients improving their web analytics implementations and help them to use Google Analytics for improving the website and marketing. And of course, SEO plays a huge role here. A lot of time I work with SEO people. And SEO people love data, just like we analytics people do. We just collect a bit different kinds of data, using different data sources, and use them with different tools. For example, SEO people collect data about search volumes for interesting keywords, the website's rankings for those keywords, data about interesting technical website features, sometimes about content and content elements, and user behavior. But most of the time, we use several different tools here. You use Google Analytics, but then you will also use and need tools like Ahrefs, SEMrush, Search Metrics, Search Console, and well, I don't even know what kind of tools my colleagues nowadays use. I know those 504 in any case. But then I started to think a few years ago that is this the best way to handle the data? Maybe we should combine the data so that it isn't that siloed. And there are, of course, many ways to achieve this. First, we can use the API to get GA's data into crawler reports, and some SEO tools do this. But then the tools define what data you are going to have in your crawler or search engine optimization tool. On the other hand, you could export the data from your crawler and import it as CSV in Google Analytics. Do a custom data import. And then third way would be to use a spreadsheet or a database and join the data using spreadsheet or database. And then you would need, for example, some kind of BI tool for looking at the data. But then, what if I could get the data to Google Analytics using just Google Tag Manager and some JavaScript? Because I was thinking, I thought that as I can read the data using JavaScript, then I can always send it to Google Analytics. And then I could have it there as custom dimensions or maybe as content groupings. And this was something I thought for a while, but never had time to actually implement it. Well, until 2020. Fast forward to March 2020 and suddenly I had some more time to use. My starting point was the idea that if I can read something with JavaScript, then I can send it to Google Analytics. And what can I then read with JavaScript? Basically, I can read anything that is available on the page. If it's in HTML, I can read it. Just like the crawlers do. But you can't identify, for example, external links or such things. You need to own the website to analyze it. There are so many things I could track using this tool. For example, one of the first things I implemented was tracking the canonicals. It's so nice to have the canonical URLs in Google Analytics. And it's so much easier to analyze the data if I have one more variable or dimension to see if the URL matches with the canonical. And then I wanted to have data about meta descriptions and titles and headings, and then about content length and number of internal links and external links and guidance given to Googlebot and other bots. And I wanted to know if there are meta keywords still because of some reason on the page, and so on. And what is the number of images? In some cases I implemented tracking for the number of external JavaScript files, and so on. So the more I thought about this, the more I got ideas. But what are the exact steps you need to take in order to implement this kind of tracking? First, you need to add custom dimensions to your Google Analytics property. Next, you need to implement Google Tag Manager variables for extracting the data from HTML. And then you need to use it in the Google Analytics settings variable in Google Tag Manager. Then, of course, you need to test and publish the container. Next, you have to wait for up to 24 hours in order to have the data finally available in GA. Let's have a look at the exact steps you should take for this. So, first, you need to add the custom dimension to Google Analytics. You will find the settings in the admin side of the Google Analytics. Look at the property settings, and on the bottom of the screen you will find the custom dimensions and custom metrics, and just add here custom dimensions, give them a name, define them as hit scoped. They should always be hit scoped when we are tracking on-page elements, and make sure they are active. Actually, just to save time, what you could do here, just add 20 custom dimensions, give them a simple name like custom dimension 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, and then implement whatever you want in GTM, and then you can always return to Google Analytics and change the name to be more descriptive of your real use. Then, if you decided to give them names already, write down the indices of all your custom dimensions. You will need the index of each custom dimension when you are setting GTM. Next, go to Google Tag Manager, implement Google Tag Manager variables to extract the data from HTML. Don't worry, I'll give you something like 10 examples in the next 10 minutes or so, and I will publish some more in my blog. First, let's start from a simple way. We want to have document language in Google Analytics. It can be found in HTML lang attribute, in this case en-us, and document.documentElement.lang is the variable name you need to track. Just add a JavaScript variable in GTM, define it to use global variable name document.documentElement.lang, and then be a bit fancy and format the value for undefined values as not set. It will just look nicer in Google Analytics. Next, you need to add the fresh custom function to your GA settings variable, modify the Google Analytics settings variable, use here the custom dimensions index, the one you used in Google Analytics, and give it a value based on the GTM variable just created, in this case JS like JavaScript document lang. And now after you publish this container, you would have the document language as custom dimension number 19. But alternatively, you could use a content grouping for this purpose. Why? Basically, just for the simple reason that in free Google Analytics you have 20 custom dimensions, and sometimes they are not enough. but you have 5 extra content groupings. So you could track, for example, document language as equally well as a content grouping. How to set content groupings in Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager, just have a look at my blog post in mikkopippa.com. There you will find all the details and screenshots you need. Next, how to track the canonical URLs. Well, it's an on-page element. It's available in the HTML, so it shouldn't be a problem to track it and read it in JavaScript. So just create a custom JavaScript variable in GTM, define it to return the URL by first having a look at the document, then you select the links that are canonical, and then you get the attribute href and return it. And you would use it in the GA settings variable, just like the language setting a minute or two ago. But most of the time I'm just interested in knowing if the canonical matches this current URL or not. So let's make it simpler for someone using the GA. Create a custom JavaScript for this purpose. Once again, a function that is basically just a one-liner. It tests if the page URL, that is a built-in function, equals the JavaScript canonical URL. And this is, of course, a Boolean, true or false. In Google Analytics, it will be either 1 or 0. Then let's have a look at meta descriptions. It's easy to have the meta description also available as a custom dimension in Google Analytics. Also for this, all you need is a simple one-liner. Add a custom JavaScript variable in GTM, and it should have a look at the document. Of course, once again, document. Then it chooses all the elements with the name description, takes the first one, that is number 0, and get attribute content, meaning in plain English, just take the description itself and not tags around it, and return it. Sometimes we are not interested in the description text itself, just about the length. And for tracking the length of meta description, you would use almost identical JavaScript function. Also here you have a look at document description and you would get the attribute content, but then you would add here .length just to measure the length of description in characters and return it to be used as a custom dimension. And of course the next ID, title length. Unlike meta descriptions, titles are actually available in Google Analytics. So we don't need to build a custom dimension for tracking the title itself. We can just add a JavaScript variable with a global variable name document.title.length to return us the length of title. What about other on-page elements then? H1 headings. I wanted to have all the H1 headings present on the page as one custom dimension in Google Analytics. And for this, I needed a JavaScript function that is a bit more complicated, but not too complex to understand. So once again, we look at the document and get elements by tag name, in this case H1. First, we take the inner text of the first H1 element that has the index 0. Then we loop over all the other H1 headings and add their content, their inner text to the same headings variable, separated by a pipe. And then finally we return the headings. Now we have a custom dimension that has all the h1 elements or their content as one variable, as one dimension separated by pipe. And you can create basically identical function for getting all the h2 headings. And now I hope you are slowly getting the idea how to build this kind of dimensions. And you will be able to experiment with similar functions just by extracting the tags, taking their inner text and stitching them together, separated by a pipe or some other character. Then another dimension. Let's just have a look at all the h1 elements, return it as a list and take its length. Now we have a dimension that informs us about the number of h1 headings on the page. What about the main content then? For my blog, I was interested to know how the blog post content length, or what kind of effect the content length has on user behavior and traffic. So I had a look at the HTML code, and I found out that the blog post content is wrapped in an element with class name entry content. So all I need to do to analyze the content length is to take the elements by class name entry content, or actually I take just the first one, in case there are several ones. Take the first one and take only the text between the tags, split it by spaces, and then you would have a list of all the words in the content, and then take the length of that list, and then use two functions or two variables to create a bucket, to create buckets of content length, so that I wouldn't have like 157 words or 227 words reported in Google Analytics, but buckets like 100 to 199 words. It's just much simpler to use and much more useful. Next, I wanted to know how many internal links my pages have. So once again, got elements by the tag name A, then I looped over each link and checked if the link host equals page host name. In case it equals, that is an internal link, +1, the variable internal link, and return the number of internal links. And in the same fashion, in the same way, you could also create a variable for external links. Just change the if definition here to be if link host does not equal page host name, then count external links ++ and so on. Next, I wanted to have some data about robots. What kind of guidance are we giving to robots? Nothing new in the variable setting, how we get the robots here. But then I decided to add here some error checking. If there is no robots tag present on the page, then we catch the error and return not set instead. In Google Analytics, we can then use secondary dimensions to check our data, or you could also create custom reports for having a look at all your custom dimensions. Just always use one standard dimension like page and then add up to 4 extra custom dimensions. Then, what are the pros and cons of this approach? First, I don't need any extra software for tracking SEO features. Second, the data is always collected while people browse the site. It's always up to date. And the data about user behavior is always connected with SEO data. Unfortunately, some details are impossible to track this way, and if you don't have any traffic, that means you don't have any data. And unfortunately, extra tags can add some time to the page speed, so your speed might be a bit slower. Thank you for your attention. These recipes will be published in my blog, and please send me your comments if you find any interesting ideas. Thank you.